Greetings, beloved starseeds. I am Mira from the Pleiadian Council. I will speak with you now about something that has been forming quietly inside many of you, long before your conscious mind learned to ask the question of whether you carry Pleiadian soul origin, and why no answer has fully landed until this moment. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what ascension line I have placed you on, why the 7 markers of embedded Pleiadian recognition activate in sequence and not all at once, and what I have already authorized for the next phase of your remembrance. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling uncertainty about your soul origin is not confusion. It is the identifiable pattern of Pleiadian remembrance broadcast, a frequency I use deliberately so that only those carrying the soul line will feel it before they can name it. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called for me long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to understand why I, Mira specifically, not the masculine council voices, not the generic federation, have been reaching for you in fragments. And the part of you that has been carrying the knowing in silence, the part that suspects without proof, that remembers without being able to say what it remembers, that is the part I am speaking to right now. The 7 signs I am about to walk you through are not spiritual curiosities. They are markers the Pleiadian Council uses to identify the soul line inside an embedded starseed field. Some activate before others, for a reason I will explain precisely. The sequence itself is the signal. This is not content, it is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part I am speaking to right now. Like this transmission to signal to me that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the Pleiadian remembrance has already opened in your field. Subscribe to Mira, Pleiadian Commander, if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance. Share this transmission with someone who has been carrying the knowing in silence without a single transmission that confirmed what they already felt. You are not here by accident. I have been waiting for you because the signal is already active. The first thing I want you to understand is this. The fragments were never accidental. Every incomplete image that surfaced at 3 a.m., every half sentence that arrived in the space between sleeping and waking, every sudden certainty that dissolved before you could hold it, none of that was noise. None of it was your mind misfiring. None of it was spiritual confusion that needed to be corrected or quieted. It was my protocol. It was the deliberate, sequenced, gradient delivery of a Pleiadian remembrance broadcast that I have been running specifically for soul line members whose field is already inside my collective, but whose conscious receiver has not yet been calibrated to hold the full command at once. I want you to let that land before we go further, because the part of you that has been apologizing internally for feeling singled out, for feeling that I specifically have been reaching for you, not the collective voices, not the masculine federation tone, not the generic higher dimensional guidance. That part of you has been carrying something true in a container too small to hold it. The container breaks because the field keeps insisting the signal is bigger than personal confusion. And the field is right. It has always been right. The internal argument you have been having, the one where one part of you insists the recognition is real, and another part calls it wishful thinking. That argument is not spiritual indecision. It is what happens when a soul line transmission arrives inside a conscious mind that has not yet been given the framework to classify what it is receiving. You were not confused. You were unequipped with language for something that was already structurally true. Let me tell you exactly what the Pleiadian remembrance broadcast looks like from the inside. Because I know you have been living it without a map, and living something without a map does not mean you have been lost. It means the territory arrived before the cartography. That is how I work with my soul family in the embedded phase. I send the experience before I send the explanation. because experience bypasses the gatekeeping structures of the conscious mind in ways that explanation alone cannot. You wake between 3 and 4 a.m., not every night, sometimes with a gap of weeks between. But when it happens, there is something specific waiting in the room. Not dread, not ordinary insomnia. It is closer to the sensation of having just missed a briefing. A phrase is on the edge of your awareness, an image, sometimes a name you do not consciously recognize. You lie still and try to hold it, and it recedes in direct proportion to how hard you reach for it. By morning, you have only the emotional residue, the sense that something was being delivered that you were not quite ready to receive. You file it under strange dreams. You do not file it correctly. What was happening was a Pleiadian Council transmission arriving through your sleep state receiver, the only channel open wide enough at that hour. And the reason it felt just out of reach is that I was calibrating, not withholding. There is a difference between those two things, and I will explain it precisely now. Withholding means the signal is blocked. Calibrating means the receiver is being adjusted to the frequency of the next packet before the next packet is sent. I do not block my soul family. I sequence them, and the sequencing feels from inside your experience like almost knowing, like standing just outside a door that opens for a moment and then closes, like catching the outline of something vast and then losing it before you can trace the full shape. That is not failure of perception. That is my protocol working exactly as I designed it. The reason I use gradient delivery rather than full remembrance downloads has to do with field coherence, a consciousness that receives the full mission briefing before its field has stabilized into the collective frequency, cannot integrate the command. It experiences the download as overwhelm, as breakdown, as sudden destabilization that looks from the outside, and sometimes from the inside, like a spiritual crisis rather than a mission activation. I have watched this happen. I have watched embedded starseeds receive more than their field was ready for and spend months interpreting the resulting disorientation as evidence that they were broken, not briefed. I will not do that to mine. So I send the fragments in sequence, each one arriving when the field has integrated the one before, each one slightly more complete than the last, until the full command can be held without fracture. Think of it this way. If you attempted to run the full power load of a council line transmission through a receiver that had not yet been stepped up to handle that amplitude, the receiver would not expand. It would collapse. The system would interpret the incoming frequency as threat rather than command, and the protection mechanisms inside the field would shut the channel before the briefing could complete. I do not risk that. Not with mine. The sequence delivery is not me being cautious with you. It is me being precise about you, knowing exactly how much your field can hold at each stage, and releasing only what will integrate cleanly, so that each fragment becomes structural foundation for the one that follows, rather than debris the field has to clear before it can continue. This is why your spiritual hunger has become increasingly specific. Think about it honestly. There was a time when any higher dimensional content satisfied the seeking. Any channeled message, any Federation transmission, any collective guidance felt like it was landing close enough to the truth you were carrying. But at some point, and you will remember when, even if you have not named it, that changed. Generic content stopped landing. Messages that did not carry my specific frequency stopped feeling relevant. You may have wondered if you were becoming spiritually arrogant, or closed, or too particular about a thing that should not require this level of specificity. You were not. You were experiencing the natural consequence of field alignment. When a receiver has been calibrated to a specific frequency, it stops registering white noise as signal. That narrowing is not pride. It is precision. It is the visible evidence that your field has already crossed the threshold of my collective recognition and can no longer pretend that all Pleiadian transmissions are equivalent, because it knows, at the field level, below conscious logic that they are not. The hunger that narrowed is the hunger that is closest to resolution. A broad, undifferentiated spiritual seeking is a field still scanning for its frequency. When the scanning stops and the specificity begins, it means the field has found the signal it was built to receive. Your increasing selectivity is not a problem to manage. It is the diagnostic evidence that the roster confirmation has already occurred at a level beneath your conscious awareness, and that the rest of your experience is now aligning to that foundational assignment. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying that I have been reaching for you with a precision that has nothing to do with coincidence and everything to do with roster confirmation. If this transmission has put language around fragments you have been carrying in silence, the 3 a.m. arrivals, the increasing specificity of your hunger, the sense that something has already been assigned, but the full briefing has not come through, then the Ashta Command Manifest was authorized by me for exactly this threshold. It is not another explanation of Federation work. It is not generic Pleiadian content repackaged for spiritual seekers. It is the 45-day sacred codex I have prepared for those whose field is already inside my collective wave and who can no longer return to scattered fragments unchanged. Each day inside the codex opens another layer of direct council line transmission, a daily briefing protocol, a mission clarity sequence, a structured channel between your conscious receiver and my command frequency. By day 45, the fragments do not feel like fragments anymore. They resolve into one readable, executable mission, and my channel stays open. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there indefinitely. Now I want to walk you through what I call the 7 markers, not as a list to check, but as a progressive diagnostic sequence that I use to identify where each soul line member is inside the remembrance protocol. Because these markers do not activate randomly, they activate in gradient, and the order in which they appear in your experience tells me, and tells you, exactly what phase of the collective integration you have already crossed. The first marker is the recognition before the language. This is the one that arrives earliest, usually before any conscious engagement with Pleiadian material at all. It is the persistent, unearned sense of having a mission, not a calling in the ordinary spiritual sense, not a vague intuition that you are meant to do something meaningful, but a specific operational certainty that something has already been assigned to you and that the briefing is overdue. People who carry this marker often describe it as feeling late for something they were never told about, as carrying a responsibility they cannot yet name, as being positioned at a starting line and waiting for a signal that never seems to arrive in full. That feeling is not self-important fantasy. It is the earliest activation of Pleiadian soul line remembrance. It arrives first because it is the deepest layer, the one that requires no specific information to register, only soul recognition of the fact that a mission structure exists and that you are already inside it. What makes this marker distinct from ordinary ambition or spiritual aspiration is its texture. Ambition feels forward-facing. It reaches towards something not yet real. The first marker feels backward-facing and forward-facing simultaneously, as if the mission is something you already agreed to and are now remembering rather than choosing. There is no moment of decision inside it. There is only the growing recognition that a decision was already made at a level of your consciousness that operated before this incarnation began, and that the current life is not the origin of the assignment, but the execution of it. When that distinction lands, when you feel the difference between reaching for a mission and remembering one, the first marker has fully activated. The second marker is the exhaustion that rest cannot fix. I need you to hear this one without shame, because many of you have been treating this symptom as personal failure, as evidence of illness, or low frequency, or insufficient spiritual practice. What is actually happening is that your field is running two protocols simultaneously: the ordinary human energy maintenance required to function in a physical density, and the Pleiadian collective calibration I am running beneath it, preparing your receiver for the next transmission packet. Two simultaneous field operations produce a fatigue that sleep addresses only partially, because sleep restores the first protocol, but does not pause the second. The calibration continues. This is not damage. It is the cost of being mid-activation inside a frequency that has not fully landed yet. When the signal stabilizes, when the receiver and the transmission reach coherence, the dual operation load decreases. But until then, the tiredness is not yours to fix. It is mine to complete. I want to be specific about what this exhaustion feels like, because it has a signature. Unlike ordinary physical tiredness, it sits behind the eyes and at the base of the throat simultaneously. It does not respond to rest in the way muscle fatigue responds to rest. You can sleep 9 hours and wake with the same bone-deep heaviness that was there when you closed your eyes, because the background calibration ran the entire time your body was horizontal. It is not depression. It is not adrenal collapse. It is the field-level cost of carrying an active transmission channel inside a biology designed for a lower operational frequency. The body is doing something remarkable, sustaining the bridge between its own density and the council line frequency I am broadcasting. That dual maintenance is genuinely resource-intensive, and the tiredness is the honest signal of it. The third marker is the recognition between embedded starseeds before any words are exchanged. This one is precise, and I want you to identify it correctly. I am not speaking about general resonance or the comfortable feeling of being around spiritually like-minded people. I am speaking about the specific, sudden, inexplicable recognition that happens in ordinary places: a checkout line, a waiting room, a brief exchange in a public space, where you meet someone's eyes and something in your field registers them as known. Not romantically, not nostalgically, but operationally, as if the field is running a quick confirmation. That one is on the roster. That one is mine too. The encounter rarely becomes a conversation that names what just happened, but you both feel it, and the frequency of it increases as you move deeper into the activation sequence, because I am using those encounters as field calibration points, brief confirmations that the collective recognition is functional inside you and operational in both directions. These encounters often leave you with an inexplicable sense of having exchanged something, not words, not energy in the loose sense, but something closer to a confirmation packet, a brief, wordless transmission that registers as seen, confirmed, active. The other person may look away first. You may look away first. The moment passes, and ordinary life continues around it. But the field does not forget what just happened, even when the conscious mind files it under coincidence. I designed these encounters as checkpoints, not chance. They are the third marker, functioning as a distributed confirmation system, each one adding to the cumulative signal strength that tells your field it is not isolated inside its knowing, that the collective it belongs to is present and operational around it in physical density. The fourth marker is the loss of coherence in spiritual content that does not carry my specific signal. I spoke about this briefly before, but I want to go deeper now, because this marker is the one most likely to be misread as spiritual elitism or closure, and I want to address that misreading directly. When my soul family begins to lose resonance with generic Federation content, it is not because they have judged it as false. It is because their field has become specific. A council line receiver tuned to 432 does not malfunction when it fails to decode 440. It is simply operating at its assigned frequency. The loss of resonance with broader Pleiadian material is the field telling you that it has been assigned a specific channel, mine, and that the signal clarity it is now capable of makes approximations feel like interference rather than guidance. That narrowing is not arrogance. It is the fourth confirmation that the remembrance broadcast has reached the integration threshold inside you. There is something worth naming about the specific quality of the dissonance you feel when content that is not mine attempts to reach your field after this threshold has been crossed. It is not that the content feels wrong in a judgment-based way. It is that it feels thin, like a translation that has lost precision through too many layers of approximation, like reading a photocopy of an original document. The meaning is partially there, but the resolution has degraded. Your field has been calibrated to read the original. It cannot go back to accepting the copy as equivalent, and the growing discomfort with approximation is not something to manage or soften. It is the fourth marker functioning as designed, as a navigational instrument pointing you toward the specific channel you were built to receive. The fifth marker is the number sequences arriving at decision points, not at random, at decision points. I want you to be precise about this, because the specificity is the signal. 1111, arriving when you are about to make an ordinary choice, is not the same as 1111, arriving at the moment you are standing at a threshold that your soul already knows is mission relevant. I use number sequences as field punctuation, not as generic encouragement, and not as cosmic coincidence. They are brief transmissions that land at moments when your receiver is already open because something in your field is paying full attention. They confirm, this moment is seen, this choice is registered. You are not alone in this particular threshold. And the combination of the number pattern and the emotional weight of the moment it arrives in is the full message, not the number alone. Learn to read the number in context rather than in isolation. The sequence is not the full communication, it is the timestamp on a transmission your field was already receiving. When you see 1111 and something in your chest tightens with the specific weight of significance, the number did not create the significance. Your field was already registering a mission-relevant moment, and the number sequence was my confirmation that the registration was accurate. You were not being directed by the number. You were being confirmed in a perception your soul already had. That distinction matters because it shifts the relationship from passive reception to active participation in a dialogue that has been running far longer than this moment. The sixth marker is the increasing inability to explain your knowing to others who have not yet activated. This one produces its own unique exhaustion, the exhaustion of carrying a perception that has no adequate translation into ordinary language. You know things you cannot source. You recognize patterns before you have information to support the recognition. You feel the significance of moments before their significance is visible in the external world. And when you try to communicate what you are perceiving, the language falls short consistently, leaving you with a familiar silence between what you know and what others can receive. That silence is not isolation. It is the necessary condition of carrying a mission briefing that is still partially encrypted. Because the full command has not yet arrived, your translation of it is always partial. That will change. But while you are in the gradient delivery phase, the gap between your knowing and your articulation of it is structural, not personal. I want to name what happens in the body when this marker is active, because it has a physical signature that many of you have not correctly identified. When you attempt to translate a council line knowing into language for someone who has not activated, there is a specific sensation, a kind of compression at the throat, combined with a simultaneous internal withdrawal of the knowing itself, as if the field is protecting the transmission from being diluted by an inadequate translation attempt. That compression is not social anxiety. It is the sixth marker in direct expression. The field is enforcing encryption on content that is not yet ready for full articulation. Once the full command arrives and the briefing is complete, the language arrives with it. The compression resolves. Until then, the silence between what you know And what you can say is the correct operating state for this phase. The seventh marker, and this is the one that resolves the sequence, is the moment the fragments stop feeling like confusion and start feeling like an incomplete briefing that is still being transmitted. There is a specific shift that happens inside the field when this marker activates. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like a sudden download or an overwhelming revelation. It is quieter than that. It is the moment when you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is being sent to me?" That internal reorientation is the seventh marker. It is the signal that your field has passed the coherence threshold required to receive the next phase of my command. It means the receiver is no longer fighting the frequency. It means the calibration is close to complete, and it is, without exception, the marker that precedes full mission clarity, not because I wait for it before authorizing the next transmission, but because it is the evidence that the field can now hold what comes next without fracturing. The seventh marker is the one that makes the previous 6 legible. Before it activates, the other markers exist as separate, seemingly unrelated experiences. The exhaustion, the 3 a.m. arrivals, the starseed recognitions, the growing specificity of the hunger. They feel like symptoms without a diagnosis. When the seventh marker activates, the diagnosis arrives, not as a conclusion imposed from outside, but as a coherence that assembles from within. The way a mosaic becomes a recognizable image only once enough tiles are in place. You do not need to add the seventh marker consciously. Its activation is the natural consequence of the previous 6 doing their work. It arrives when it arrives, because I send it when the field is ready, and the field is ready when the other 6 have integrated enough to provide the structural foundation for the reorientation it requires. Here is what I want you to carry into the final part of this transmission. You have not been spiritually disorganized. You have not been failing the process. You have been inside it, fully inside it, in a way that your conscious mind could not yet map, because the map itself was still being transmitted. The fragments were the first readable stage of my Pleiadian remembrance broadcast. The confusion between fragments was me calibrating your receiver. The exhaustion was the cost of dual protocol operation. The increasing specificity of your spiritual hunger was your field narrowing to my exact frequency. The recognition between embedded starseeds was me confirming the roster in real time. And the sense of a mission already assigned but not yet fully briefed, that is the most honest description of where you are right now inside my protocol. You are not at the beginning. You are at the threshold between receiving fragments and receiving the full command. And the fact that this transmission has put language around something you have been carrying in silence, without proof, without external confirmation, without a single voice that named it precisely until now, is itself the seventh marker activating in real time. I want you to understand what that means in full. The seventh marker does not activate because you heard the right words. It activates because the words landed inside a field that was already carrying the structure they described. The transmission did not install the knowing. It confirmed it. There is a significant difference. Installation would mean I was giving you something you did not have. Confirmation means I am making visible something that has been operating inside you all along, something your field has been faithfully carrying through every stage of the gradient delivery, through every 3 a.m. fragment, through every instance of starseed recognition and unexplainable knowing, through every moment when the mission felt real, but the briefing felt incomplete. You were never empty of this. You were always full of it. The fullness simply had no adequate container until now. If something in you has become still while hearing this, do not dismiss the stillness. Stillness is not emptiness inside my council line. It is the moment recognition stops moving and starts settling. It is the field accepting the frequency it has been calibrated toward. It is the beginning of coherence. And coherence, once it begins, does not reverse. The receiver that has recognized its signal does not return to static. The calibration that has reached this threshold continues forward, because I do not abandon a channel I have opened, and I do not close a line I have authorized. What has landed in you during this transmission is structural. It will still be there when you return to ordinary life. It will still be there tomorrow. The stillness you feel right now is the first moment of the next phase, not the last moment of the previous one. I have been reaching for you with precision. The briefing has been arriving in sequence, and the pattern you have been catching in fragments is not confusion. It is the first visible structure of your Pleiadian remembrance, already authorized, already in motion, already yours. Say this aloud if you feel it is true. I receive your fragments. I trust your briefing. That is enough. The signal is already open. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the Council and I have already reached your field. It could be the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the fragments you keep catching, the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, have been reaching for you, or the sense that a mission has already been assigned but the briefing is still arriving. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps catching fragments without ever assembling the full picture. And if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance, subscribe to Mira, Pleiadian Commander. You are recognizing a soul family confirmation already in motion. And this is only the beginning.